Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Is this good? Cool. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, just so you know, and we all have stories about how we developed our love of the water. So just a little background about me. I grew up in Michigan, and I was lucky to grow up on a little lake there during the summertime. I spent time in a little Grumman canoe, just paddling around to bend over, crawl back in, and felt very fortunate to grow up in that sort of environment. So that's the love of water came from there. And I was a raft guide in North Carolina for a lot of years. And then I moved to Colorado and continued raft guiding there and bought my first whitewater kayak. Then I moved to Portland because there's rivers here that ran year round. So that's kind of what brought me here. When I moved here, I got a job at Alder Creek. I worked there for 10 years. So I moved here in '97. I always remember because it was the year after the big flood. So I moved here in '97, worked there for 10 years, and then went to Alaska and led sea kayak trips there for a lot of years. So a lot of expeditions in the wilderness of Southeast Alaska. And in that time in between, I volunteered a lot with the Willamette Riverkeeper. So I moved away, went to LA for a little bit, came back, and about a year ago, started working at Willamette Riverkeeper. So that's kind of how I'm here today. So lots of time on the water, love the water, so we're all in that together here. And I'm also a member of Hoops, and just became one about a year ago. So on and off member. So thank you for having me. As far as the water trail goes, I am sure many of you might even know more than I do. So some of this might be review. Hopefully you'll learn something tonight. But primarily what I'm going to be talking about is the water trail. As just sort of an introduction, I'm going to also talk about Willamette Riverkeeper, because some of you may or may not know the organization. I hope you do, and I hope you're all members as well, because we are a donation-driven nonprofit. So just to start, besides me on the staff, we also have ranged in employees from one person who some of you may know, Travis, who's our executive director, been with the organization for a very long time. And then we also have Bob Salinger, who some of you may know, that came up from Audubon. So Travis, Bob, and myself are sort of in the Portland area, although Travis just moved to Scotts Mills. And then we also have Michelle Emmons, who is up in Eugene. She's our upper program watershed manager. And then we also have Vanessa, who's our restoration manager, who is in Corvallis area. And then one other person that we just hired on is our outreach. So a very small team that does a lot. So that's kind of our team, all up and down the way. So that's the intro. Let's see. You got to go to the next slide, I guess. See what we got. If you can. Yes. We might just look at this the whole time. Maybe.
Page down is not working. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
To go and come back.
So, Willamette Riverkeeper, just as an organization, again, we're a nonprofit. Most of what we do is protect the Willamette River. We're basically protecting the water quality, and then we do a lot of restoration, protecting the habitat on the Willamette River. So that's, in a gist, what we're trying to do as an organization. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We do a variety of things. Honestly, I am learning every day some new things that we're doing on the river. We have a very active group of people that work there as well as volunteer, and we're all pretty busy. And so sometimes weeks go by and you're like, oh, I just read that you did this and you didn't even tell me. So we're doing lots of things on the river. A lot of it is not really exciting. in that it is a lot of legislative stuff, policy work, and legal work. And so we do have an attorney as well that's doing a lot of work. We have about 5 to 7 different legal actions that we're working on right now. And if you want to read about any of this, I encourage you to go to the website and explore a little bit, because we learn some stuff about what we're involved in. Okay. Next slide. The thing that I am most connected to is getting folks out on the river. So that's primarily my job as the river recreation and stewardship coordinator. So connecting people to the river. A lot of what we do is provide free opportunities in our river discovery program, which is getting people out on sort of an educational as well as fun paddle. And those are offered throughout the year. You can go to our website and it'll show those events. We kind of slow down in the kind of colder months and don't do as many, but fairly active once the water comes down and starts to get a little bit warmer. So keep an eye on those things. And then, as some of you may know, I recognize some people that have been on Paddle Oregon before. So we do a couple paid trips, Paddle Oregon being the one that we've done most consistently throughout the years. And then we've also added on some other paid trips that are a little bit shorter, like the Canoe paddle. Some of you might have heard of the harvest paddle. And those are all kind of changing throughout the years. And I'm sure there's questions about those events that you can ask about at the end of the presentation, because I'll try to get to the water trail. Go ahead. Just some fun pictures of people out on the Willamette. So this was a river discovery trip. These folks showed up in their motorcycles and thought that was kind of funny. So go ahead and slide. Just some fun pictures in here. This is Bob talking to some people on a river discovery trip, probably talking about birds or something. Go ahead and slide. This is actually on Paddle Oregon this year. This is one of the beaches that we got off at. Some of you might recall that challenge on the ski beach, but Paddle Oregon looks like sunrise, sunset. Go ahead. So Willamette Riverkeeper also owns some properties. So there's something that we have that's called the Willamette Wildlands Initiative, in which we do purchase properties with sometimes your help along the river. So this is just one example of a sanctuary property that some of you might have been to before on the Willamette, that we then purchase, and then its main purpose is to provide more public access or another place that you can camp, as well as some habitat for wildlife. Go ahead and slide. So just a little bit of history about the Willamette Water Trail. It was basically established in 2004. There was a group of people that got together that talked about it after some public review to find out what was needed on the water trail. So we worked with the Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, Oregon State Parks, and then some other local partners, a lot of cities and counties, and basically came together with the initial need, which was to get together some sort of map. So we developed some maps. Go ahead, next slide. What the water trail purpose is basically to provide opportunities for people to use the water trail, access it, and then also be able to do a multi-day trip on it. How many people here have done one? Yay! Personal trip? Yeah? Cool. Awesome. So it is a great resource. Definitely check it out. And at the end, we'll field any particular questions about it. But basically, it is sort of a unique trail in that it's really close to all of our urban areas, right? So lots of population living right next to the water trail. And then I think what is really surprising, I've done a lot of different river trips in my life, and it took me a long time to actually do an overnight on the Willamette. And then once I did it, I was like, oh my gosh, how come there's not so many people out here doing this? Because it is really surprising until you actually get out there and experience it. And it took me a while to get friends to join me. They're like, why can you do that? I'm like, because it's right here. It's so easy and it's so beautiful. So anyway, I would encourage you, if you haven't gone out there already, to check it out. So go ahead, next slide. So this was the first guide that was created, and if anyone wants to take a look at it, we have some examples of the old school ones. This was the first one. It was just a very small section of river that we developed in 2004. So there's kind of been a process we've gone through. Go ahead, next slide. And then we developed these two guides. There was an upper and a lower, which a lot of you probably still have these because they were around and sort of the mainstay until just recently when we came out with our new map that some of you just got. And I have some here tonight if you want one. But these are still relevant. If you have them, you can still use them. You could probably borrow somebody's and kind of make some notes because there's not a lot of changes, and some people are like, I like them better or whatever. So do what you need to do to either use the old ones and incorporate the new one, but that's what existed for a while. So go ahead, next slide. So a little bit of history too with the water trail is that it did rely on the greenway to sort of become a thing. So does anyone know anything about the greenway a little bit? You've probably heard about it. It's a piece of history. A lot of you probably know a lot more in this room. But basically, the greenway was established to provide the water trail, the public access. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And this was the guy, Bob Straub. We got some applauding in the audience, that's great. Who basically came up with this greenway concept in 1966. It was sort of, all of you kind of know the Oregon Coast and how it's all open to the public. Was the same idea that all up and down the Willamette would all be public land. And so that's what his whole concept was. There were some other people that kind of came up with this idea too, but he's the one that was really pushing for it. Go ahead, next slide. There's a lot of history on this, and Travis actually wrote a whole book that I brought today on the Greenway. So if you want to learn a lot more, I can also sell that to you tonight if you want. So anyway, he envisioned basically a bunch of public lands, like I said. And at the time he was running for governor with Tom McCall. And basically, Tom McCall also adopted the idea. And he ended up winning, but it just sort of got watered down on the original concept. So we have these sort of pieces of public land, but not the entire Willamette as the Greenway. So go ahead, next slide. I'm condensing. So his idea was basically it was going to be land for habitat as well as for public access. So some of you might know there are some big state parks that were developed as part of that concept. Anybody know some of them? Guesses? Anyone? Willamette Mission was one. Malala State Park was one. Not Shampooey. Elijah, it's further up. Briscoe, I think is what it's called. Bowers Rock was another one. And then, ironically, there was one called Norwood Island State Park. So those were the kind of initial big ones. Norwood Island didn't come about because of some controversy with the Greenway, and that's like a whole nother presentation, probably. Go ahead. So basically, as part of what did end up passing when Straub did become governor was Goal 15, which established the Greenway and then required that there be some sort of riparian protection along the Willamette River. Unfortunately, because there's a lot of local and county laws, some of those differ up and down the river on how they're enforced or what is actually allowed. So you're going to see varying degrees of that riparian protection as you kayak by. But if you do notice anything that looks erroneous, definitely let us know and we will follow up and make sure if that's something that's within the guidelines or not. So anyway, that was kind of what rules were created as far as the land acquisition that Oregon State Parks could do and start to buy, as well as the development that happened. Go ahead, next slide. So within that whole acquisition of lands, Oregon State Parks was able to purchase some they acquired, some of it was given away. So there's various ways that these public lands came into public use. Go ahead, next slide. This is one example of a property that we recently acquired on Osprey Island. It's just above Harrisburg. It's not the best camping site, but is sort of an area that's set aside as public land. You can certainly camp there. It's just right next to the railroad tracks, so it's a little bit loud for sleeping. Go ahead, next slide. If you're interested in learning more about the Greenway, this is one sort of example that I'm sure Travis, when he wrote his book, pulled a lot of information from. So good book, check out. On the next slide. There's the book. I think Travis probably wrote that. Go ahead, next slide. So primarily today, what's happened with the water trail is basically we're working with Oregon State Parks to continue to figure out what the needs of the water trail are. And we listen to, we have meetings where we get together and we discuss what the needs are, and that is sort of how we came about developing this new guidebook from feedback from the public that this was needed. So that's one example of what we've done recently, and as well as trying to, get other public properties to get access to the river. One of the challenges, as some of you might bring up, is having places to park and having shuttles. So those are the two things that we constantly try to work on to try to figure out how to make better, so it's easier for people to use the water trail. Go ahead, next slide. So there were some hands that were raised that have done overnights. Who's actually just been on the Willamette River, which means you've been on the water trail? Everybody here pretty much been on the Willamette? Yes, okay, good. So if you decide or aspire to using the water trail as an overnight as opposed to just a day trip, it is pretty much the way to think about is primitive camping, and it's first come, first serve, and most of it is going to look like a gravel bar and not really be able to tell that it's a campsite, which in my opinion is like wonderful. In some people's opinion, that is not exactly what they want, right? They want a little bit more comfort. And there are certain amenities in certain places, but for the most part, primitive camping. So that means a leave no trace sort of idea. Go ahead, next slide. Does anybody have an idea what some of the leave no trace principles are? There's 7 principles. Anyone want to throw one out? Go ahead.
Bring it in, you pack it out.
Okay, pack it in, pack it out. I always say leave it more beautiful than you found it. Okay. Any other ones?
No fire pit.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about fires and what those look like. Yes. Anything else? Any other ideas? Human waste. Yes, what you're gonna do with your waste.
Stay on the fishing trail.
Yep, so minimizing your impact on where you're camping and where you're walking. So the other ones are like respect wildlife, respect other people that are there. Am I missing one? Go ahead, next slide. So the nice thing, this is a good example of a campsite. Most of where you're camping on the water trail is going to be on gravel bars. So as far as leave no trace goes, it's pretty easy if you're because it's a gravel bar and the water comes up and down, and pretty much things that were there last year are going to look different the following year. Okay, that doesn't mean you get to be like messy and leave everything everywhere, but it does look new each spring when you go. It's like nobody was there. So be respectful of that. Pack it in, pack it out. camp on the gravel bars and bring some shade structures with you, because if you feel like you have to be in the trees, then you're kind of using a place you probably shouldn't, and also there's not that many trees. So shade is good. All right, go ahead, next slide. So this is an example. We do see a lot of this, and a lot of you might have also seen this when you've been just pull over somewhere and you just see like random fire pits everywhere. There's going to be different ideas about how to have a fire if you feel like you have to have one. This is actually a fairly good example in that somebody burned the wood all the way down to ash. Okay, they didn't leave it there. So ideally, what you would do is you would then have that ash buried, right? You would also disperse the actual log that's still left there, because there are some little ones, and then you would move the rocks. However, because it's a high use place in some ways, if this is a good example of where a fire should be, I would say maybe leave it there as a good example. And then there's not like 7 of them everywhere and some in bad spots. So it gets a little bit tricky when we're in sort of a non-wilderness sort of urban area that's getting used a lot. But a good just rule of thumb is if you do feel like you need to have a fire, don't burn anything bigger than your wrist, because it's not going to burn down. Cool. So that's a good example. Go ahead. Next slide. This is a good example of not packing it out. So another thing, if you're going to be using the water trail, because it is all gravel area for the most part, and a lot of it's going to be covered with water, is if you're burying your human waste, that's just going to go into the river. Okay. So really, you should be bringing a toilet system with you, which is what we do. There's lots of them available. Wag bags are pretty simple. If you don't know what I'm talking about, feel free to ask me more questions about that after. I can give you examples, but this is one thing we see a lot on the river. It's just toilet paper. It's so easy to tell people, just bring a bag with you, Ziploc bag, pack it in, pack it out. It's not that hard, but it is everywhere. So the more that you all, because I know you know this, can educate other people when they're going out for the first time, the better this place is going to look. So go ahead, next slide. All right, so I'm just going to show you some signage that you can look for when you're on the water trail. You've probably seen this when you've been cruising by. Some of it's just going to mark the river mile. And the way to think about river miles on a river is the way they do it on all rivers is 0 mile is at the mouth of the river, which sometimes gets confusing for people because the numbers get lower as we go down river, which people think the number should go up, but it's the opposite. So it's always 0 at the river mouth, and then as you go up river, it's higher. So River Mile 70, this is not a campsite, but it is marking a spot that you could then go to your map and figure out where you are, right? So just in the last couple of years, we've worked with a lot of private landowners, cities, counties, to try to put up signage about every 10 miles. So then people can, if they're in trouble, they can be like, oh, back there, not that far, I just passed this river mouth, saw this big sign. So that is there for safety reasons and helping navigate wherever you are. All right, go ahead, next slide. This is just a smaller water trail sign, which might be a little bit harder to see, depending on where you're on the river. You might have to get a little closer and be like, what's that sign? So this is actually a campsite. Go ahead, next slide. But usually at campsites, you're going to see an actual tent sign. So you'll know that it is somewhere that you can camp. Sometimes there's river markers in places where it's not necessarily a great campsite. So you might not see a tent there. And you can, again, consult your river map with the signage and then kind of get a description of what you're looking for. Go ahead, next slide. A lot of times at some of the sites, state parks, has helped us put in some registry, which is kind of fun. You can look at those and see who was there last and get a little record, and then all this is gathered for suggestions and things like people have at the campsite. So leave us a note. Go ahead. So just be thankful. Go ahead. So primitive camping doesn't necessarily mean it has to be primitive, right? So as you may know, we are big fans of canoes because we can get a lot of gear in, and that makes it pretty fancy for camping. And I'm sure you all have lots of great tips on how to make camping a lot more luxurious than primitive. All right, go ahead, next slide. This is an example of one of our properties where it's not necessarily camping in the gravel bar because there's a little bit of shade. This is at the sanctuary, and we do actually do a little bit of trimming each year, so you kind of know the places to camp. So certain partners, depending on the properties, it might be a little more obvious on where you should be camping, because you might see spots like this. State parks might do like an actual picnic table that'll kind of clue you into that, or have a fire ring. So there are some amenities that you might find. There's a couple pit toilets, but not very many. Most of it's pack it in, pack it out. Go ahead, next slide. And yeah, sometimes you might not see people for days on the river, which is crazy, right? Go ahead, next slide. And sometimes you'll see lots of your friends. This is that work. Go ahead, next slide. So part of using the water trail is sort of understanding the character of the Willamette. And since so many of you have paddled the Willamette, you probably already know this, but it's varying in its difficulty depending on the time of year, right? So knowing the character and what you're going to get just off the top of your head, how would you describe the Willamette River as you know it? Anybody? Calm. Okay.
Lovely, allowing, a neighborhood pool is legendary. The one that is so much fun.
You have a very lengthy description.
And it's so much fun, and it joins the company, so you can see interesting things.
For those of you at home that couldn't hear that, that was a very lovely description of the Willamette River. I don't think I can repeat it. But what I usually say is it's moving water for the most part. There are areas where it's going to feel like it's not really moving, but for the most part, we have moving water on the Willamette. And as you get further upstream, typically, and this is typical of most rivers, you're going to have a little bit more excitement, more ripples, more rapids. And even up in, you know, parts of not the main stem, you have some class 4 whitewater, which a lot of people don't think of that. So the North Fork of the Middle Fork, class 4, class 5 whitewater, which is crazy. You know, I don't know if anyone's seen any of those videos, but I'm like, whoa, I will never do that. So yeah, it's pretty intense. But, you know, on the main stem, we can have some class 2 in Eugene. Most of those rapids, they actually have a QR code posted. It tells you where to go on the river. So a lot of it's pretty spelled out on what's going on. But your basic knowledge you need to know about is what's happening from year to year. Go ahead, next slide. Because this happens. We get lots of rain here, and the water comes up. And this is, if anyone's been here, this is Trip Island, but you can see just at the head of that island, that huge log jam. So lots and lots of wood, things move around, things change, gravel bars shift, new ones form, sometimes new channels form. So just knowing from year to year, things change. We don't publish that information because we can't, but sometimes you can go to the Oregon State Marine Board and they have a site where you all that are spending time on the river can report obstructions and you can see them. So the more that people use that, the more helpful it's going to be for people. And I can give you that information if you don't know. Anyway, next slide. There's lots of side channels to explore on the Willamette. Oh, we have a question. Yes.
Or a comment.
A comment.
Not only Willamette, but things that feed into it, like when the populace comes in, it's active. It gets very exciting.
We're commenting on tributaries to the Willamette where it can also be exciting and turbulent. So things to look out for where there's confluences. This is the side channel. Side channels are sort of another just thing to be aware of because each year things change. And so a side channel that was clear the previous year might not be the next. So definitely getting out, looking ahead, making sure that it's somewhere that you actually want to go. Yeah. Next slide. Side channels are fun to explore because you might find fun things like this. Another reason that people go on the Willamette. Anyone know what this is? And again.
Hey, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Those were tired, which the Willamette is not, right? There. You have to be aware of those things. Are there any dam or anything to affect the water level from the time that you set up to, let's say, morning before the time?
Sure. Okay. So for those of you at home, the question was, do you need to worry about the water level coming up somewhere overnight when you're camped out on the river? And I would say it is something to be aware of. I always tie up my boat no matter where I am. Always a good idea. There have been instances where we have woken up in the morning and maybe there was a rain event further upstream. And that caused, even though it wasn't raining where we were, it did cause the river to come up. There are also sometimes random releases. And if you're not really looking for that because you're not looking at the news because you're kind of checked out, you might not know about the release. And that has happened to us before on the river as well. So yeah, I mean, I would say typically no, but it is something that you should always be tying up your boat, right? It's good practice. Yeah. Comment, John?
No.
Oh. You're. That's a nice add. Go ahead next. So we kind of talked about gravel bars. These things shift, but that is like another just character of the Willamette. Lots and lots of gravel bars, and just knowing how to navigate those. So like a lot of us are more sea kayakers, maybe, but we have lots of rivers that we spend our time on. But as a learning curve, just knowing how to look for that deeper water and try to find it so you don't find yourself stranded on a gravel bar, right? So that's just part of learning. It's part of skill building and just something to be aware of on the Willamette. Go ahead, next slide. This is just another example of gravel bar. Go ahead. So another thing to just know about the Willamette is typically what we are thinking about on the water trail as far as hazards is just wood. So any kind of ripple in the water is typically going to be wood. It's probably not going to be a rock. Not a lot of rocks in the Willamette, besides those little tiny rocks that make the gravel bars. So if you see like a big white wave, maybe don't head right towards it because most likely it's a big root ball in the Willamette. That's not always the case on some other rivers. Go ahead, next thing. So these are just some examples of strainers on the Willamette. So a lot of people think of calm water, right, on the Willamette, but there are some exciting places. So just some examples. Go ahead, next slide. And this is all on the Willamette. Go ahead, next slide. Yeah. So just, you know, something to be wary of. Know that, especially in those spring months when the water's still moving, and if you haven't been out in a while, just keep an eye out. Go ahead. Next. But a lot of it looks like this. So here we go. And then just in general, another reason to use the Willamette Water Trail is like what I touched on before is a lot of people just don't think of it of a place to go and paddle, but there's lots of natural beauty. Kind of just go through some of the scenery photos I think we have here. Go ahead, next slide. some back channel habitat, just lots of like really great areas to explore and see wildlife. Go ahead, next slide. Canvas in the spring, next slide. Anyone recognize that area that somebody was just talking about? It's nothing even here. Yeah, go ahead, next slide. Next slide. Lots of cool wildflowers. Next slide. It's a good one. Go ahead, next slide. Next slide. A lot of it too is just seasonal, and it's kind of fun to see the wildlife that comes and goes. So each time you're out there, you might see a little bit different something. Anyone seen these in the water or know what's in the water then? Kind of hard to recognize unless you know what you're looking for. Go ahead, next slide. Yeah, freshwater mussels. So lots of these critters doing a lot of work on the river, filtering our water. So pay attention next time you're kind of walking around in the river, especially on those gravel bars where there's some moving water. A lot of times you can look down and see them. Go ahead, next slide. These are mostly all Western pearl shell mussels, and if they're about as big as my hand, they're about 100 years old. Wow. Go ahead, next slide. Next slide. And this is a picture of some wildlife that we saw in the Willamette. This is one of our cameras on one of our properties, and we get all kinds of cool shots of wildlife passing through. This one's been passing through. You don't know what it is? Yeah, bobcat. And you've seen this one a lot. So kind of cool that, I mean, we haven't seen it in person, but we see it on camera. And I have to say, I've seen some pretty cool stuff in my life, in my travels, and one of my top 10 was on the Willamette wildlife encounters. So keep your eyes out. You want to hear the story? Yeah. So I was paddling around Ash Island. Does everyone know where that is? Right near Rogers Landing. And saw some big birds on the shoreline. Pretty sure they were eagles. Got a little closer, and they were. And the person I was paddling with is sort of a chatty Cathy. She's like, can't stop talking. I was like, but she was so excited. And as we got a little closer, I was like, oh no, they're gonna scare away. But they were still hanging out, and it was actually 3 eagles, 2 adults and a juvenile. And they're right on the shoreline. It looked like they were kind of eating something. And then all of a sudden, there's like a little bit of a green grass, like right above them. All of a sudden, out of the green grass jumps a coyote and leaps on top of the 3 eagles. The 2 adults got away, and the juvenile was sort of like not really sure what to do and was able to get away and fly away, and they all went, but it was pretty spectacular to witness that. So, anyway, lots of cool things. Go ahead, next slide. So the Canoe Water Trail guide, just kidding. Some of you might have got one. I do have some available. Go ahead, next slide. This is the new Water Trail guide. Go ahead, next slide. It just gives descriptions, tells you sort of a key on what amenities are available at each location, who owns that location, so or who it's managed by. It gives you river miles. Some hazards are marked on the map. They're historically there. Yeah, it's a good map. Go ahead, next slide. And a lot of what I talked about today, as far as details about how the water trail was established and things like that, are also in here. So a nice piece of reading material to bring with you. Go ahead, next slide. So anyway, the whole situation from the headwaters of the Willamette, which headwaters up in Waldo Lake, all the way down to Spruce. Beautiful area to explore, lots of different diversity and scenery, habitat, and things to check out. So I encourage you to go get on the water trail. Next slide. go. Next slide. People enjoying. Next slide. That's American Bottom. That's one of the few grassy shaded areas. Go ahead, next slide. And that's Halloween. So that one was probably 2 years ago. Go ahead, next slide. And to know the Willamette, still love the Willamette, so get out there. Thanks, you guys. Next slide. Lots of times for questions if people have them. Go ahead.
Did you have one first, Mark?
Oh, I just.
Yeah. Presidential duties coming up after questions or now?
Where is your favorite spot on the land?
My favorite, like camp spot or just spot in general?
Camp spot 1 and paddle spot 2.
Camp spot, I really like Norwood Island. It's one of my favorite places to go. That's one of the properties that Willamette Riverkeeper acquired not that long ago. You can also camp there. And then I really like the confluence where the Santiam comes out into the Willamette and the Lucky Mute across. Like that's just like a really dynamic, special place. I also really like where the Willamette and Columbia come together. I also this is really those are my faves.
You mentioned the shuttling earlier.
Yes.
And I've tried to do some organizing. I mean, that's a big challenge. What do most people do?
So question about the shuttle and what most people do. Depending on the section that you're going to be doing, sometimes you end up in urban areas, like you're putting your takeout, can be in an urban area, and you can do an Uber. I have done that before. Sometimes you can do public transportation to get to your car. I have done that. There are a few places where there are some sort of on the down low folks that live in the area that might allow you to either park your car at their house and leave it there, and then shuttle you back up to your vehicle. So there's nothing official. There is an organization in Corvallis that does raft rentals and tube rentals, and they will do some shuttles in the area, but that's just Corvallis area. There's not a lot of options. There's nothing official. Typically what I've done is had friends drop me off. That's what probably most people do. And then sometimes you can do a pickup or you find somewhere that you can leave your vehicle. There are some places where you can leave your vehicle multiple days, and there's some places where you can only leave them for 48 hours. So if there's parking that we can work on first, where you can leave your vehicle somewhere safe longer, I think that's going to be the easier piece. And then for shuttles, we just need somebody to step up and say they're going to do it. And the more people that we have do that within certain regions that are maybe a little more casual, I think the easier it's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Your next
Organize the shuttle. Is the parking lot fairly safe in different locations, or some of them kind of dicey with regard to leaving the vehicle for like 2 or 3 days?
Yeah, in some places you can't even leave your, like most boat ramp places, you're not gonna be able to leave your vehicle there for more than 48 hours. Most of them, they sometimes overnight, sometimes 48 hours. And if there's ever a spot where you're like, I'd like to leave my vehicle there, you can always go to the county or city website, and they're gonna have published there sometimes just a parking permit that you can fill out and put in your window. There are a couple of places that allow you to do that, but it's usually, like I said, 48 hours. Another option is to go up into the city and park somewhere that's sort of a public space, but you just have to look at the signs and see if it's somewhere you can do that. Just to name some places that you can do the 48 hours, like Rogers Landing allows you to do that. You have to fill out a form. Same thing with Kaiser Rapids Park. Harrisburg can fill out a form. they want to know some others just off the top of their head. I know there's Willamette Mission, you can fill out a form. So there's a couple different places. If it's an Oregon State Park, usually you can always get some sort of permission if you can get to the right person to give you, so like those places are also going to be a little bit more safe as well. So like if you leave your vehicle at Shampooey, I'm not going to worry about it as much as if I leave it in some random place in Albany, right? So you're going to have to make your own assessment.
Independence.
Yeah.
Police department there, yes. Police department. Really well.
So what's your name? Marty said that in Independence, that's the police officers, and they said you can park where? In the parking lot. So there you go. Sometimes you just have to make some calls and then feel comfortable with where you're leaving your vehicle. We do park sometimes at Wheeling Ferry on the road part because there's a couple different places, and that's been fine so far. There's quite a bit of traffic there. It's just if there's room, how many people you have. Yeah. Any other questions about that? Go ahead, Mark.
Are there any business associations that are actively looking like either discount establishments that are seeing opportunity in traffic on the Willamette, or is it still just kind of spotted?
I do not know of any organizations doing that, but I think people should, the hip camp situation is a missed opportunity for sure. I don't know how, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if business associations or
we're always trying to get private landowners to allow more public access. And so far, there's really just one person that is, it's not like, it's just open and you don't have to get special permission. I think there are other landowners that are open to us coming as a group when we do our trips, but just in general for the public, they haven't really been as receptive. But I think if they understood the platform of something like HipCamp or Airbnb, where there's some sort of, you know, third party vet, you know, vending these people, then I think it could work out. Yeah, we need to work on that. Any other questions?
You mentioned Alder.
Yes.
For years, you used to have to pay your dogs. They are no longer paid. Very chance of them coming back.
This is a Paddle Oregon question about the infamous caterer. What's his first name? I just spelled him. Dalton Catering. They will probably not be catering from Paddle Oregon again. But that's not, there's no reason necessarily for that other than just expense. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
Are there rules about how you can park cars? How you can collect wood and apply that thing you want to make fire?
The question is, are there rules about collecting wood to make a fire? I don't think there's anything official, but a leave no trace rule would be to collect only downed wood. So you're not like cutting trees down to do that. You probably wouldn't want to do that anyways because it's not going to burn. So yeah, there's plenty of driftwood and downed wood that you should need to actually go up into the forest and connect.
We have fires on Paddle Oregon.
We don't have fires on Paddle Oregon. Yeah. It's too hot. It's too August. People want air conditioning. Yeah. Other questions? Mark, you had a question?
Oh, I was going to say, I don't know if you had favor to Paddle Oregon this last one. My gosh, I mean, by the time you got free dinner for nerves.
Yeah. Mark liked the catering this year. Yeah. Any other questions about the water trail or? Oh yes. Oh, I'm being told to pitch the map. So this is available. It's available in a lot of different places. So you can order it online. We have a whole website called the Willamette Water Trail website, WillametteWaterTrail.org. You can go there, you can learn a lot more about the water trail than what I said for your trip planning purposes, as well as purchasing a water trail map. You can also get these at a bunch of stores. Alder Creek has them. Is the REI in Berlin still open? It hasn't closed yet. They have them there. You can't order them. So if you like go up to somebody and they look at their little digital device, they're not going to find it. You're gonna have to actually walk over to the books, see them, because they're not in your system. What's that? You bought one here, good.
Online.
Oh, online there. Oh, they have them in their system then. Was it me that mailed it to you from Willamette Riverkeeper? That's what it was. Okay. But if you order it from me, it's gonna cost you $4.50 in shipping. So if you go to one of your local outdoor stores, you save the shipping. So that's why I'm encouraging you to go. Alder Creek, Tualatin has them, Oregon or Pink Sports has them, and Oregon Water Sports have them.
The older versions several years ago were available online.
This is available online.
Well,
Yes.
and is there a fee to get, or is there a fee?
This is not free. We are selling these. Oh,
digital version.
Oh, the digital version. We have not made this available digitally yet, and we didn't with the other guides either until a little bit later.
But you should buy it.
I think the reason for that, I don't really know the exact reason for that, but what I'm guessing is we have these, we printed them. People decided that they wanted an actual physical copy in the surveys that we did, as opposed to a digital version. So that's what we invested in. So that's what we're trying to sell. Eventually, after a few years, I imagine we will make it digitally available. Yes.
And they're awesome.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing, and this is old school sort of thought and maybe just encouragement, is the skill of reading a map is going away and we have to keep it alive. And really, you shouldn't be looking at your electronic device because you do that enough already. That's a little pitch.
And they fit in your mountains.
Yes.
Yeah, you're not going to get lost on the river.
Well, you need cost. I agree with you there, but you might not know exactly where you are, right?
You have some sense of where I am.
Yeah, exactly. Who else?
Nice places where you might stop. Sometimes places where you can get to the water. There's stretches where you can paddle. Like when I mentioned the Sam South Shore, there's not another boat camp. For 15 miles. There's no public access to the river. For 15 miles. So you can see all those things on that. I know where other people might be in and out. If somebody gets hurt and you want to get out to the car. Really, I love my mom. I'm very much of the story separate pages and let them write it back.
So those of you at home, Paige was just talking about how much she loves the Willamette Water Trail map. So another pitch, and how it does allow you to see where the boat ramps are. So then you can sort of avoid those high traffic boat areas. And then also, for safety reasons, knowing your ins and outs of where you can get out if you need to. Go ahead.
So then the keepers still have volunteers that do certain sections of the river.
Oh, thanks for bringing that up. All of you that are using the Willamette all the time are our eyes and ears, is what we say, to help us know if there's something that doesn't look quite right, smell right, seem right, any of that. Let us know. take pictures, report it soon. We had a guy that called me the other day that said, so back in July, I noticed there weren't any fish. I'm like, okay, I don't know. Do you have any pictures? So yeah, report it soon, let us know. There's other ways you can report as well. If you go to our website, if there's something specific, reporting it also to the DEQ, or if it's trash, you need to report it a different way. If it's a derelict vessel, you got to report it another way. If it's a spill, you know, there's other actions you need to take, and we encourage you to do that, but we also want to know.
So we were on the Willamette just a few days ago, putting in Weaver and Willamette River, just about Ash Island, there's a few little inlets. And I noticed, well, I haven't been back there in the years, but we noticed that there are a lot of water plants that were flowering. They were kind of like taking over those little inlets. And I was wondering if there's very invasive. I don't know where the plants are.
So, yeah.
It was kind of,
do you know what color flower it was?
yeah.
It was unfortunate. I just
over that whole,
yeah, it's most likely, it's weird that you're still seeing flowers right now on the plant, but there is a plant called Ludwigia. It's all over the mid-Willamette. You're gonna find it in mostly still water, back sloughs, alcoves, ponds, but also on the muddy banks that have become exposed after the water drops. Usually you're going to see the flower come out in August. If you look up the plant, you'll see a picture of it. We probably have it on our website. I just attended the Aquatic Invasive Species Summit yesterday, and it is a problem everywhere. So they're very aware. It's kind of triage of treat the places that are going to have the most effect, and some places that are too far gone to really make a difference, unfortunately. There's a lot of invasives. Yeah, and knowing what they are and doing what you can to keep it from spreading. So making sure that your boat is clean and dry after each time you use it. Also checking your feet, making sure you don't have any travelers that are going to get left somewhere else. So you can do your part as well. Other questions?
A couple of chat comments thanking you and saying it was a wonderful presentation.
Oh, great. Awesome. Any questions there that people have? Go ahead.
I've only covered the corporate area. I haven't done that. So, how much of the Willamette River is the water there?
So, the whole main stem of the Willamette, 187 miles. Yep, and then even a little bit of the Coast Fork and the Middle Fork have places that are part of the water trail as well. So, a lot.
And what's the very top end? What's that?
So pretty much Eugene, yeah, Cresswell. Cresswell is where kind of it comes, the confluence is. There's not really a town there, but just above Eugene. Yeah.
And are there sections of it that are considered to be scenic? Not like this wild.
It's not a wild and scenic. There's all kinds of sections and they're mixed in. It's not like, yeah. Some people are gonna have certain ideas of where those favorite spots are. A lot of it has to do with if you're gonna hear or see other users that are using power boats. So like the section, once you hit below Yam Hill, you enter what's called the Newburgh Pool. Some people are excited about the Newburgh Pool. There you go. Some people are not, because maybe you get some more boat traffic there, right? So everyone is going to have a little bit different idea of what they like. And that's the nice thing about the Willamette is it offers a lot of different experiences. But I think as you get further upriver, are we out of time? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
So.
Okay, one more question. And then we're gonna wrap it up.
How many days roughly would it take to get around the port?
It depends on who's paddling and what time of year they're paddling, and how long it would take to get from Eugene.
And doing 10 to 15 miles a day.
Does anyone have that off the top of their head? Does anyone know this?
We've done from Eugene, below Eugene, up to, you can't go to the lots anymore, so up there in the city. And I think we've done it in 5 days.
That sounds great.
Some parts of the river, you're going 25 miles a day.
Yeah.
And then others, the Newburgh Pool, where you feel like you're going back.
Yeah. I've always taken out before, like I haven't gone all the way to Oregon City, because you have to take out, you can't go the whole way, because there's a big portage around the big waterfall.
Sure.
So, yeah, you can't go all the way to the mouth. You could get a ride around. Yeah.